Controversy, a word no big corporation or company likes to hear. These can really stain a company's public image, whether they put out a defective product, slander a property, face behind-the-scenes drama, or accidentally leak information to the public. And Thomas the Tank Engine is no stranger to controversy. Like most brands, Thomas has been in the news once or twice for a bad reason. So today, I wanted to go over some of the controversies the Thomas brand has had in its 80-year history. There's actually quite a lot. I was astounded to see how many controversies this franchise has been in. Before we begin, I want to mention some things. First, some of these controversies involve politics. For these, I'm going to do my best to present the facts and leave my opinions out of it. You can decide for yourselves who you agree with. On the topic of politics, please don't make the comments section political. This is a Thomas the Tank Engine video. Finally, I won't be covering any Thomas fandom drama. This will only cover controversies with the official brand. So without further ado, let's travel back in time to the first Thanksgiving to get turkeys off the menu. Let's travel back in time to 1953, where the brand would get its first piece of bad press. The 1953 BBC Adaptation. The railway series had not even been around for a decade before its first controversy arose. Way before Thomas and Friends was even thought of, plans for a television series were in the works around February 1953. On May 1st of that year, Eric Marriott, editor of the railway series, made a deal with the BBC for 2 stories to be adapted, those being The Sad Story of Henry and Edward Gordon and Henry. The production was to be live on a model railway, with modified Meccano locomotives representing the cast. The first episode was broadcast on June 14, 1953. Following the success of the first episode, they would adapt James the Red Engine next. Success was not on their side, however, as the broadcast was a complete failure. For one, the model of Henry infamously derailed on a set of points, and a hand had to come in and re-rail him. Alongside that, the model of Edward broke down while filming, and James had to replace him. There was a spew of other things wrong, such as models not being like the illustrations, the model railway only being built days before the production, and the story being changed if it had 10-minute runtime. The broadcast angered both Audrey and Marriott, and the public saw it as a train wreck, pun intended. Apparently, the disaster was almost a national concern. While the director, Douglas Mayer, tried to blame it on the model engines, Wilbur Audrey made an ultimatum. Either the mistakes were fixed, or the show would be cancelled. I guess the BBC didn't want to bother ironing out its issues, as while the James stories were planned for June 28th, it was cancelled, and no future episodes were produced. I wonder what those kids watching must have thought happened to Henry. He was never let out of the tunnel. Today, this is one of the most infamous pieces of Thomas lost media, as while letters, records, and a picture of James have surfaced, no footage is believed to exist anymore, as the BBC likely taped over it. Personally, I do wish that some footage of this existed. It would be very interesting to see what a railway series adaptation in the 1950s would be like. The Henry Sneeze Controversy. In early publications of the railway series book Henry the Green Engine, the story, Henry Sneeze, used a slur. The text reads, "Smoke and steam and ashes spouted from his funnel. They went all over the bridge and all over the boys, who ran home black as..." Yeah, not good. As the civil rights movement continued around the world, the issue was reported on in the Sunday Times in 1972, over 2 decades after the book's publication. Many people found it somewhat hypocritical that such a word was coming from someone who was a part of the clergy. Audrey would apologize for the use of the word, and all future publications would change the sentence to be more appropriate, saying instead, "as black as soot." While the Thomas the Tank Engine man tried to fight that it was more culturally appropriate at the time of its publication, it still seems like something that should have been avoided. The Henry's Forest Controversy. This one is very infamous amongst fans. In the 1995 documentary The Thomas the Tank Engine Man, Wilbur Audrey talked about his opinions on the television series. He was not a fan of Season 3, particularly the episode Henry's Forest. What he didn't like is how Henry stopped in the forest without alerting a signalman, which breaks Rule 55 and could cause a serious accident.
What responsible driver would stop as if he was in a roadside lay-by? They showed a lamentable ignorance of Rule 55. You can't do it.
He also didn't like how close the trees were to the line, and how it could cause a fire hazard due to sparks from the funnel. Britt Allcroft would state that she had seen many railways with trees close to the line. Fans speculate that the episode James and the Trouble with Trees was inspired by the criticism, as in the story, the railway was removing trees too close to the line as they could cause trouble.
As a matter of fact, Bossy Boiler, Sir Topham Hatt is inspecting the island for trees that are too close to the line.
To be honest, you could counterclaim by saying Henry moved into a siding away from the main line, and his driver most likely alerted the signalman off screen. Also, I feel Audrey was looking a bit too deep into this. Like, it's obviously fictional, and there's countless examples from across the series of real-world practices not necessarily being respected. Audrey would have had a heart attack watching Big World Big Adventures. But we also must remember that he created Thomas, so he has the right to not like what others are doing to his creation. So while this wasn't necessarily a controversy in its time, this clip has gone on to have a significant impact on the show and the fandom, as people were shown how Audrey truly felt about the popular TV series. The 1998 A Noisy Surprise controversy. In 1998, a soundbook titled A Noisy Surprise was released. The story was about a circus coming to Sodor, and you could push buttons on the books to make noise. It seemed harmless, right? Well, to save money, the printers recycled leftover cardboard behind the sound effects board, like placed behind the actual Thomas theme plate, and the leftovers came from a guide to sex. Oof. It made national news in the United States when somebody's copy of the book had the soundboard come off, revealing the scandalous material beneath. The publisher said it was an accident, and the book was recalled. Naturally, the printers were warned not to have this happen again. Okay, so that's all well and good, but how did that soundboard even get ripped off? Unless the factory used the world's worst glue, you'd actually have to pry this off yourself with force. A very weird situation, one that is still baffling to this day. The 2003 Crash Psychology Study. In 2003, British psychologist Dr. Brian Young criticized the show for its amount of crashes. He thought that if kids saw the crashes, they would be too scared to board a real train in fear that it would crash. This was seen as such an issue that ITV had to make a statement saying that the show was safe to watch after multiple reports from concerned parents. An Australian news broadcast also brought on a hit entertainment representative to talk about how the show is safe. Honestly, this does seem like a bit of an overreaction. I mean, like, come on guys, the crashes are one of the best parts of Thomas. In fairness, they are definitely a bit over the top at times, which Hit definitely took into account, as with later seasons of Thomas, the crashes were filmed differently. Engines usually crash facing away from the camera instead of before where you saw the head-on collision. But literally in the first episode of Season 8, Thomas has a head-on collision? I don't know, I see the concern, but I feel like it would only affect certain children. The 60th Anniversary Party. On February 28, 2005, a DVD was released in the UK called Peep Peep Hooray! 3 Cheers for Thomas. Included with the DVD was an invitation to go to the 60th Anniversary Party at Hatfield House in Hertfordshire. Advertised were entertainers such as magicians, face painters and jugglers, storytelling, games, play areas, a live show with Sir Topham Hatt, and meeting Thomas the Tank Engine himself. The event was set for June 4th. It seems like a child's paradise, right? Well, here's the thing. With a brand like Hit Entertainment, they'd have live events down, right? They've done Day Out with Thomas events countless times, so it really shouldn't be difficult. Unfortunately, the event was a disappointment for all attendees. Oh, so what did they do wrong? It can't be that bad. The only representation of Thomas was primitive, only on stage, and the other engines were just cardboard cutouts. So yeah, parents and children alike were not happy with this party. But hey, at least it was a stage show. News reports came out shortly after the event from the BBC, stating how much of a failure this was. Only then did Hit realize the event was a calamity. In fairness, however, I think they did handle the situation well. They set up a special telephone line and email for customer complaints where they could receive a full refund. After this, Hit made sure such a travesty would never happen again. Little to no information is known about this event, so it seems Hit has really tried to cover everything up. Or maybe nobody wants to remember their trauma. I think the biggest issue with this event is that it was held in a field and not a railway. If it was something similar to Day Out with Thomas, I'm sure the event would have had a lot more success. To summarize what I've just talked about, think of this as the Wonka experience, but with Thomas. The lead paint crisis. Here is a very infamous one, and probably the most well-known controversy on this list. In June 2007, Learning Curve announced a massive recall on many of the items in the Thomas Wooden Railway line. This was due to high levels of lead in the red and yellow paint. Lead is a very dangerous metal, which could pose harm to children. Over 1.7 million items sold between January 2005 to May 2007 made the list, in what became the biggest recall in Learning Curve's history. The items affected by this were James and his tender, Lights and Sounds James and his tender, Team Colors James and his tender, Skarloey, the mail van, the baggage car, the red coal car, the Day Out with Thomas 2006 coal car, the Soda Line caboose, the holiday caboose, the musical caboose, the Soda Fire Crew, Old Slow Coach, the yellow and green boxcar, a stop sign, a crossing sign, the yellow cargo car piece, the Soda Smelting Yard, the ice cream factory, and the deluxe fire station. That is quite a lot of items, but this wasn't the end of Learning Curve's troubles. Another recall was issued in September that same year, this time having too much lead in black and gray paints. 200,000 more items sold between March 2003 and September 2007 were affected. These were Toad, the black cargo car, the olive green cargo piece, the top of a tree, and the bottom of a signal. Customers who sent back their items received a free gift back with their amended items. However, 2,000 of those gifts were Toad, who was recalled months later. If you were affected by this recall, let me know in the comments if you received anything else in return. I'd be very interested to know. Anyway, this made national news, being reported by many news outlets, and even the creator of Thomas Wooden Railway, Roy Wilson, was appalled with the issue. The Thomas Wooden Railway was a highly trusted and popular children's toy line, so it was very confusing as to how the factory would let something like this happen, as according to Roy, paint samples were taken every hour, and no lead ever showed up. In the end, RC2, which owned Learning Curve, agreed to pay a $125 million civil penalty, which also let them deny that they violated federal law. Personally, I lick my lead paint license sounds James all the time, yet you never see me die. The 2009 Sexist Hierarchy Study. In 2009, University of Alberta professor Shauna Wilton published her thoughts on gender inclusivity in media as part of a collection of research papers titled The Politics of Popular Culture. In her section, titled A Very Useful Engine, The Politics of Thomas and Friends, she came to the conclusion that the show, quote, pushes a conservative ideology and relegates female characters to the back of the train. Essentially, it's an inappropriate show in her eyes. She noted that the characters are discouraged from thinking outside the box, or from trying to express an independent point of view. But what bothered her the most were the roles assigned to female characters. Hit did not comment on the study, but it's theorized that Mattel saw it and was part of the catalyst solution that went to the Big World Big Adventures rebrand. This could explain why multicultural and gender-based characters suddenly replaced veterans of the show. It's worth noting that when this paper was released, Wilton received a lot of backlash, ranging from slides on her abilities as a mother to death threats. So regardless on how you feel about this analysis, please be mature and don't threaten a random researcher curious about what their children are being taught on television. The 2011 Winter Holiday Controversy. On May 22, 2006, the UK and Irish DVD, Little Engine's Big Day Out, was released. This DVD wasn't entirely themed to a certain holiday, but some elements of Christmas would be in the episode Keeping Up with James. These would be referred to as the Winter Holidays, as it usually was in the hit era. 5 years later, this would lead to former UK government minister Anne Widdecombe saying that the DVD was made to be politically correct by using the term Winter Holidays. It also wasn't just the aforementioned term. They listed a Christmas tree as a tree with decorations. According to the article, it was extra ridiculous not to mention Christmas in a children's story, as youngsters would be anticipating the special day for months in advance. So if everything leads to the island celebrating Christmas, why not list it? I believe this was so other kids that celebrate Hanukkah and Kwanzaa could watch it without Christmas elements. But the criticism doesn't stop there. Hilary Fortnum, one of Audrey's daughters, said that her father would feel very strongly about this, as Christmas was very important to him. It's also seen as ironic as Wilbur Audrey was a vicar of the Church of England. Hit Entertainment did put out a statement stating the release wasn't a themed DVD, like I mentioned, but quote, "We do put out seasonal releases that have Christmas in the title. Last year we had Christmas Express, and next year we are planning another Christmas title. This would turn out to be Merry Winter Wish, which was delayed until the following year to redub it with the term Christmas." The 2014 Martin Sherman drama. In 2014, through the Soda Island fan site, Thomas' US voice actor at the time, Martin Sherman, announced his leave from the series, citing contractual disagreements with the team being the reason. He explained that he was feeling exploited for the low wage he was getting, and apologized to fans who would be affected by this. Hit Entertainment saw this post, and threatened his agent to take legal action if Martin didn't take it down. Rather than do so, he did an interview with The Guardian, in which he shed more light on the situation. Essentially, Hit was paying him survival money, i.e., hardly enough to get by. He was making less than he would have if he had been on a US Screen Guild contract, which in his case would have been about $250 million. Luckily, he could get by, as he was also a voice actor for other shows and video games. Sherman said he felt bullied and silenced, and was reportedly seeking legal advice regarding the blog post, but it was later removed. Hit, as any good Mattel-owned company would, refused to comment on the situation, and simply wished him the best. But with Sherman gone, who would voice Thomas in the USA? The role was about to go to David Mencken, but he declined in support of Sherman. Interestingly, Sherman apologized in December 2020 for having him decline the role, and regretted it, thinking he would voice Thomas very well. With this in mind, the role will go to Joseph May, who in my opinion is a great Thomas voice. But Martin didn't just voice the titular character, he also voiced Percy and took over Michael Brandon as Diesel. So, Percy would go to Christopher Ragland, and Diesel would go to his UK voice actor, Kerry Shale, who is just the best Diesel voice actor out there. The 2016 Henry Spots Trouble controversy. I didn't think any Thomas episode would be banned from airing, especially from the Brenner era, but here we are. In 2016, the 19th series episode Henry Spots Trouble would be released. However, the episode would be banned from airing in Australia. Why? Well, when Sir Tom Head says, chickenpox is nothing to be scared of. 3 viewers, yes, 3, thought Sir Topham Hatt was implying that chickenpox was, quote, a mild disease that was nothing to worry about, thus sending an anti-vaccination message.
You serious?
Okay, I know I said I wouldn't state my own opinions here, but this is just really funny to me. It's such a leap of logic to go from Sir Topham Hatt telling Henry, a train, who's completely out of character by the way, to not worry about getting chickenpox, to an anti-vaccination message. He's a train! Of course he didn't have to worry about chickenpox. Regardless, an official statement from ABC stated that the episode did not align with the Australian Government Department of Health's Immunise Australia program. Through this, ABC decided that the episode was not suitable to air on ABC Kids and undertook not to broadcast it in the future. To be honest, how else could they gotten the moral across? Like, Henry literally can't get the chickenpox. Man, this episode was stupid. Anyways, despite its ban, the episode was released on the DVD Whale of a Tale, so I guess that it wasn't too big of a deal. The 2019 Mattel accounting era. This next one is somewhat related to Thomas, but really is more of a Mattel issue. I'm talking about it anyway because I think it's interesting. In early 2018, Mattel employees discovered that they had made a hefty accounting error the previous year relating to how Thomas Friends was classified in Mattel's accounts. Instead of restating their earnings like a good company would, top executives moved with PwC, a company that is essentially the investor's watchdog, to bury the mistake. This means that they deliberately hid flaws in its accounting system from the market, and that PwC backed the plan. An insanely bad look for the company, one that would not look good to the public. However, a whistleblower stood up and did the right thing, wrote a letter to Mattel stating the issue. Following the complaint, it restated the earnings and announced its CFO would leave the company, but said no fraud had been committed, and PwC would remain its auditor. A hilarious Thomas interpretation was created, and can be found in the article where I got this from. I've linked it in the description. The 2020 Royal Family Drama. Before the beginning of the story, in Thomas and the Royal Engine, Prince Harry of the British royal family gave a special introduction. This was most likely because it was a royal special, and they probably wanted to make the special even more, well, special, as it was also the 75th anniversary. But there's a slight problem. Harry and his wife Meghan had stepped down from their royal family duties in January of that year, and the special released in May. Man, that aged poorly really fast. And yes, Thomas the Tank Engine can be related back to the Harry and Meghan drama. So when you think about it, why use Harry for the opening and not, let's say, Anne, the Princess Royal, who actually read through the book adaptation for a campaign? Or Prince William, who is currently higher in line to the throne, by the way. This was filmed before Harry left his royal duties, and they probably were on a tight budget and other restrictions going on due to a certain something in the air, so they couldn't refilm it with someone else. Surprisingly, Britt Allcroft would come out and criticize this marketing stunt, although fans thought she was criticizing the story. However, it was cleared and passed her best wishes to the writer, Michael White. The 2023 Wooden Railway recall. And on to the final and most recent controversy, and we're back with Wooden Railway. Shocker, I know. In October 2023, Fisher-Price recalled 2 products of the 2022 Thomas Wooden Railway line, those being the Troublesome Trucks in Crates and Troublesome Trucks in Paint. The concern for this was that the magnets could fall out, causing both a choking hazard and the magnet ingestion hazard. 21,400 units were recalled, which shows just how much of this line is sold. Once returned, customers received a full refund. I kind of find this stupid as from my research, this problem only happened once. I don't think it would affect all the units. But now, these items are considered rare, even though they look like that. Now, while that might be all the actual events that caused controversy, Thomas has also been in the news for other reasons, and lots of opinions have been given. Before we look at these opinions, I want to talk about 2 aspects of the actual Thomas show that many find controversial, and are essentially in every opinion article ever written about the franchise. The sad story of Henry. Henry's gotta be the most controversial Thomas character out there. So many of these controversies have involved him in some way. This one, however, is probably his most famous. Essentially, there's a misconception that Henry is still in that tunnel, that Sir Topham Hatt did not let him out, and at this very moment, he's dying of starvation. However, if they sat down for another 5 minutes and watched the next episode, they would see that Henry was allowed out of the tunnel eventually. Brits seem to have noticed this way back in the 80s, as she made Sir Topham Hatt more lenient on Henry's punishment in America.
"We shall take away your rails," he said, "and leave you here until you're ready to come out of the tunnel."
Crazy how many people believe this despite it being the easiest thing to prove wrong in this whole video. Speaking of Sir Topham Hatt, the Fat Controller. Everyone knows that since the Railway series, Sir Topham Hatt has always been called the Fat Controller. However, once the TV series began to market itself to American audiences, Britolkoff changed any script that referred to Topham as the Fat Controller. Apparently, the term was considered too rude in America. While that might seem absurd, the term the Fat Controller has begun to be controversial in other countries too, as seen in this newspaper article. Daewoo Thomas events in the UK seem to have banned the use of the name outright, the reason being fat is a slur. But it gets worse, because as of 2021, Mattel has outright banned the name the Fat Controller from any form of media or event. That's right, the Fat Controller is no more. I don't really get this one, as it feels like the Fat Controller is so worked into pop culture. Like, when was the last time you heard of someone from the UK using Sir Topham Hatt? Additionally, like I mentioned earlier, many people see Topham as authoritarian and a dictator. However, if they actually watched the show, they would see he actually loves his engines and cares for them, but he's not afraid to scold them or put them in their place. The relationship has always been depicted as more of a father-child dynamic, which makes sense for the primarily child audience. And it makes sense why he teaches them. That's what any loving parent would do to their child. I feel if people saw Topham as a father figure to the engines instead, these thoughts probably wouldn't be as prevalent. And no, Topham doesn't scrap his engines. He intentionally made Sodor a safe haven for all engines to continue working. Plus, he's a great railway controller. Who else would think to keep sugar in an open wagon? The repressive, authoritarian soul of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. Alright, on to these articles now. First off, the most well-known article criticizing Thomas comes from the New Yorker. This is well known for painting the show in a dark light, citing examples of Sir Topham Hatt as a dictator and how he left Henry in the tunnel forever and ever. The writer states that after looking through the Thomas wiki, they saw that Thomas had a repressive and authoritarian soul. It stated that how Audrey disliked change, and uses other examples such as Smudger being turned into a generator, Bulgy being turned into a henhouse, Scruffy coming apart, and the spiteful brake van being smashed into pieces. The writer goes on to use the 2009 article as reference. What a very official source. It's also stated that the trains compete for bigger jobs, in which Sir Topham Hatt will give them praise, and that's some kind of dopamine to them? And then she cites a Tumblr thread, stating how the show, quote, canonically takes place in a train post-apocalypse, where the island of Sodor is the only safe zone in a totalitarian dystopia, in which steam trains are routinely killed, and their body parts are sold or cannibalized for repair. This is followed up with the inclusion of the illustration from the book Stephanie the Bluebell Engine, showing what other controllers do. The article ends with a mention of Martin Sherman's dispute, and how the trains are due for a similar revolution. A pretty insane article in my opinion, one that was seemingly made to gain clicks, which it definitely did. Countless other videos use this as their basis, and the New Yorker will put this on their Twitter account every once in a while. They'll never let this thing die, will they? Thomas the Tank Engine needs to shut the hell up to save children everywhere. And the other article I want to mention is this one from The Guardian. This article explains why a mother remembered why she banned Thomas in her household after learning about the situation with Martin Sherman. This article goes over more of the Sir Topham has a cruel man argument, as well as discussing that Thomas is sexist, before going into a deep dive of the season 13 episode, Tickled Pink. The summary is that she thinks that James doesn't deserve humiliation in his pink primer. But the biggest takeaway in this article was that she claimed that Thomas was racist. In her words, for the record, all the villains on Thomas and Friends are the dirty diesel engines. I like to think there was a good environmental message in there, but when all the good engines pump out white smoke, and the bad engines pump out black smoke, and they are all pumping out smoke, it's not hard to make the leap into the race territory. This was covered in a news story as well, in which it interviewed a hobby store and its patrons? Strange choice. Most of them agreed that this lady was looking too deep into the show. While I agree, I can't seem to shake the racist bit off. I'm going to admit, from the hitter to about season 16, the show seemed to treat diesels much differently to the steam engines. For example, in Misty Island Rescue, Thomas makes fun of Diesel for not being able to pull the Joby with logs because he's a Diesel.
No, Diesel! I'm sure Sir Topham Hatt means a really useful steamy. You'll never be that.
In Season 14's Diesel special delivery, Diesel mentions he is never clapped and cheered for, to which James responds,
"That's because you are a Diesel."
and in Emily and the Special Coaches from Season 10, she mocks Diesel.
Well, there's nothing special about smelly old diesels.
There's tons more instances of them essentially making fun of the Diesels for being Diesels, so I honestly see where she jumped into the race territory there, but she totally got it the wrong way with the smoke. That's just how these engines work. And steam engines can puff out black smoke too when they have a huge ash buildup. I don't know, I think I'm getting a bit too technical here, but it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. And finally, the most bizarre thing I've ever found on the Thomas Wiki. In 1992, a woman was run over by her husband, who was driving a Thomas-themed tractor. The woman suffered broken legs as she sued her husband for $125,000. It is referred to on the wiki as the Thomas incident. Wow, how controversial. Well, Thomas has had quite a lot of controversy. There's a few things I've decided not to include, such as the backlash to Big World Big Adventures and All Engines Go, but even without those in, this is still quite a big video. Let's hope I'll never have to make a part 2 of this video. This script is already 9 pages long. That's going to be all for this video. This has been the biggest video I've ever worked on. Countless hours of research, script writing, recording, and editing reported to this one, so I hope you enjoyed it. And what's your favorite Thomas controversy? Mine is the lead paint crisis, as well, I love Wooden Railway. Speaking of Wooden Railway, as of right now, the rest of July will see the release of the next NW special, Philip the Diesel Box Cab. I've worked pretty hard on this, so when it does release, I would love for you to check it out. But after that, I don't really have anything, other than the full special. So I go to you, the audience. What videos would you like to see come to the channel? Maybe another theme park video? Or a DVD video? I've got lots of these ideas in the pipeline. Or maybe something completely different. Whatever you have, give me ideas. I also have some myself, so if I receive nothing, I'll do one of those. But hopefully by the time this is released, I'll have an idea. Finally, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Patty, aka NGF Studios, for his help on the 1953 BBC adaptation. He helped me with a ton of knowledge about the broadcast, and even let me see the recreation he and the 1953 team have been working on early. I highly recommend checking out their recreation that they have been working on for the past few years. It's very well researched and put together, so much so that it may be the closest we get to the actual broadcast. Thanks again, man. With that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.